Technology moves fast, and now so can you. Discover Polestar, the all-electric performance brand vehicles redefining how we drive. Precision engineering, minimalist design, and software that evolves with you. Experience it at Holden Group in Norwich and Bury St Edmunds, or let us bring the test drive to your door. Proud sponsors of the Cambridge Tech Podcast. Polestar, electric performance, redefined. Discover at holdengroup.co.uk/Polestar. Welcome to the Cambridge Tech Podcast, talking all things technology from the heart of the UK's tech capital. Here are your hosts, Faye Holland and James Parton.
I'm Faye.
And I'm James. So how was your week last week?
It was a bit of a blinder of a week, actually, James. Thank you. Mostly that was down to client work. Carol was working her magic in my team and a beyond obscene amount of media coverage for our clients. We were meeting for lunch as a team last Thursday, and I was like, are you just doing this so that you get the gold star when we all meet for lunch? Because it was just crazy. But obviously really good news for the clients. What else I did? Lots of 21 to watch stuff, meetings with sponsors, very much led by Gemma Dorling, who is the queen of all things 21 to watch. And then we had a team lunch. And I have to say, I do love the excuse of this time of year for getting together with people. So we had opportunity to celebrate lots of successes of 2025 and talk about the future. So that was really good. And I'm sure lots of other teams are doing those kinds of festivities. You can let us know what you've been up to too. So yeah, loads of catch ups and, obviously getting the work done before the end of the year. So did you go out on any Christmas do's?
Yeah, I've been out for one, which is really nice. And we're having our Bradfield team lunch tomorrow, actually. So looking forward to that.
What else have you been up to?
Well, I didn't go anywhere, which made a nice change, actually. It's been a bit of a hectic couple of weeks, but applications closed for the Trinity Bradfield Prize. So I've been head down reviewing all of those and long listing the applications ahead of our shortlisting session on the 15th with all of our lovely judges. Quite a lot of podcast admin stuff, actually, and guest preparation. We do actually put some effort into this, don't we?
We do.
Yeah. Despite what we do say, we do actually work hard.
Well, no. Can I just correct you on that? Despite what you keep saying.
Yeah, that's true.
Okay.
That's true.
Yeah. We'll talk about that. We're not doing that anymore. We do put a lot of love and work into this.
We do. Yeah, we're very professional. We put our Christmas tree up, so I'm feeling festive. I'm curious this year, at Casa Holland, how many trees do you have this year?
So I'm kind of failing this year. I've only got one tree up so far.
What?
I know.
Oh, so far. You qualified that. That's good.
So far. They'll go up one a weekend now, basically, and they run up till Christmas, and then Boxing Day, they all start coming back down again, so don't worry. So if you said you're feeling all festive, does that mean we're going to get you in a Christmas jumper this year?
I have brought a new Christmas jumper. I know. I'm as shocked as you are.
That's amazing. I want to see it.
Yeah. I'll wear it for our last recording session of the year and then we can get a photo. And on that theme, what's your favourite Christmas movie?
So I think the all-time has to be the classic It's a Wonderful Life. No, it has to be.
The wrong answer.
Is it? Well, so then I liked Last Christmas when that came out. But to be honest, I like really, 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 really bad Christmas movies. I like any Christmas movie. Yeah.
It's got to be Elf though, right? It's got to be Elf.
Yeah, Elf's it's a good classic, isn't it? Good classic.
Brilliant.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm going to watch that this weekend.
Nice.
Right. So we've also got some new news, haven't we, in terms of the podcast?
We have.
Yeah, we've got our new lead sponsor, which is Holden Polestar. You probably heard the advert at the beginning of the episode, so we're very excited about that. And we're hitting the mainstream.
We certainly are. I mean, it's really great news because it just shows that how much emphasis is put on the Cambridge Tech ecosystem. So we're absolutely thrilled to have them supporting the podcast. And actually, when we were having the conversations, we went through all of our listener stats, and they're pretty cool, you know. So 70% of the listeners are senior leaders. So CXO, directors, owners, partners, VP level, that kind of thing. We've got over 40,000 downloads, 70,000 impressions on our LinkedIn content alone. And the audience has changed actually a little bit. So 51% of the audience is from the UK, with 34% from Cambridge itself, which is actually the 34% is pretty consistent. 33% is the USA. That's a massive jump from the last time that we did the stats. So that's kind of interesting. And then obviously that long tail on the rest of the world, totaling 97 countries, which is amazing.
Maybe we need to go on holiday to every country where there's been a podcast download.
Yeah, we might need a bit more sponsorship for that, James.
Yeah, we might do. Yeah, there's a trip.
Indeed. Good.
But yeah, joking aside, there's loads of opportunities to reach the audience. So please do reach out if you're interested in finding out more on how to get involved with this.
Lovely. Right, let's do the news. So we've got a few pieces for you today. Hot off the press, first of all, Hothouse Therapeutics has announced its exit from stealth with a £2.9 million funding announcement to progress their journey to revolutionise modern medicine by developing sustainable, scalable pharmaceutical compounds through AI-optimised plant-based chemistry. The investment from Synbio, Startcode and UKI2S, TwinPath Ventures, Wren Capital, a number of angel investors and an Innovate UK grant will help the Norwich-based startup deploy its platform to solve one of the vaccine industry's most pressing problems, the global dependence on a single unsustainable source of the critical adjuvant QS21. This is like a really exciting company who are bridging AI, biology and chemistry and turning leaves into laboratories. And do tune in early next year to hear from CEO Dr. Dave Shepherd and Head of Informatics Dr. Phil Spence, who will both be joining us.
Our next story is a space story. So the UK Space Agency has announced a total of £17 million for 17 space projects through its National Space Innovation Programme. One of the companies benefiting is Flittronic, which has design facilities at Cambridge Science Park and is a leading designer and manufacturer of advanced RF and microwave solutions. Under the new programme, it will develop a high-powered 550-watt Ka-band solid-state power amplifier, and the project will advance Flittronic's proprietary gallium nitride technology and integrated system design, setting new standards in efficiency, linearity and reliability for satellite communications. The award reflects the strength of our innovation pipeline and our place in the UK's space ecosystem, said Tudor Williams, Chief Technology Officer at Flittronic. It will also enable operators to transition from travelling wave tube systems with reduced operating expense and enhanced reliability, helping to support more sustainable and future-ready satellite networks.
Cambridge-based Syndicate Room, a UK leading VC investment platform, has revealed that its Climate Tech's SEIS fund, managed in partnership with Carbon 13, has surpassed initial investment targets. Co-founder Tom Britton told Business Weekly that the haul reflects that investors are increasingly seeking tax-efficient opportunities that deliver both financial returns and environmental impact. He says the fund's performance comes at a pivotal time as investment into UK-based climate tech companies surged by 24% in 2024, reaching £4.5 billion, demonstrating unprecedented investor appetite for sustainable innovation. This growth reflects the UK's position as a global leader in climate technology investment, with climate tech attracting between 80 and 90% of impact investment. You can listen back to our interview with Nikki D from Carbon 13 in episode 109. So well done to both parties.
Yeah, and our final story this week is Cambridge Future Tech have a new company in their portfolio. A spin-out, Dewpoint Systems from the University of Hull has developed in collaboration with Cambridge Future Tech the commercialisation of a next-generation evaporative cooling technology that has demonstrated around 90% lower electricity use in real-world testing. The company is now raising pre-seed funding to build its team and establish commercial channels. The technology has the potential to transform the data centre industry with lower costs and emissions. Dewpoint Systems CEO Nick Simmons said, "I'm thrilled to be working with the teams from the the University of Hull and Cambridge Future Tech to commercialise dew-point cooling. Sustainable cooling is critical to the energy transition, especially given the relentless growth of data centres.
That's great. And it's great to hear another new company in the portfolio. Certainly, that was something that Owen suggested. He was going to be sending us some new news. So that's definitely one of them. Okay, so let's move on to this week's episode. This is another from this year's Cambridge Tech Week. This time it's on the growth challenge and how to scale responsibly.
Yeah, as leaders race to integrate AI, ensuring that safety, ethics and trust is more critical than ever, how can we scale AI responsibly while mitigating risks, avoiding bias and maintaining transparency?
So let's hear from the panel as they explore the frameworks, policies and innovations shaping the ethical expansion of AI.
Why don't we tee up our final panel, the growth challenge, how to scale responsibly. Our chair for this session is the founder of Creative Intelligence. So with her guests, Emily van der Land.
We've had talk about productivity, how AI can help us work faster, better, stronger. We've had talks about humanoid robots, how maybe there'd be 13 million humanoid robots among us in 10 years from now. We've been talking about acceleration, which is not new if you're familiar with the AI conversation. I think it's really important that altogether I invite you to look at how we can move forward responsibly. I also would like to propose a little thought experiment, one that always gives me a lot of peace when thinking about the overwhelm of AI. And that is that we are currently in a real pivotal moment because we are 75 years away from the year 1950, and we're also 75 years away from the year 2100. Now, at equidistant points of these two very maybe different civilizations, right? We're in the middle, so it's normal, it's uncomfortable. I just want to get that out there. And with that, I think it's also important that as we talk about these AI technologies, as we talk about policy, as we talk about business adoption, all these things that form how we are technically using these technologies in our society, that we consider that the smallest decisions we make today have impact 75 years from now, in the year 2100. In the green room, I was asking, what's the thing that unites us all? And we thought, are we tech ethicists? It's like, nah, it's too wavy. We call ourselves apparently the tech pragmatists. So with that, let's have a very pragmatic look at how we can scale AI responsibly, all the while exhaling and leaning back in our seats because it's the last session, the last panel for today. Ray Eitel-Porter is the author of Governing the Machine, How to Navigate the Risks of AI and Lock Its True Potential. I heard it's coming out soon, so keep an eye on that. It was even advised by Stuart Russell and Reid Hoffman, is that right? That's pretty cool. Reid also led Accenture's global responsible AI practice and built its AI compliance program, so talking about doing things responsibly. He's also a senior research associate for responsible AI at Intellectual Forum, Jesus College, right here in Cambridge, and also an independent consultant. So with that, that's Ray. Next, we have Jacob. He's the Director of Science and Technology Policy at the Tony Blair Institute for Global. He's an International Fellow at the Digital Ethics Center of Yale University. And at the TBI, Jacob leads a global team of policy researchers to develop actionable recommendations on science and technology policy. And he even holds a PhD from the Oxford Institute. And moving on to Daniel, who is Daniel Quirk, a senior policy manager at Wave, a very exciting company you can keep your eye on. And he is building embodied AI software that gives vehicles the safe driving intelligence to drive anywhere. Daniel also has a strong background in policy. And with that, maybe it's a good idea for us to have a little round robin and to just give the different angles that we bring to the conversation. So maybe, Ray, you want to get us started?
Throughout my career, I think what's always fascinated me is how you can apply technology to help us do things better. And that's kind of been the theme that's run through. And I think what's interesting is up until about 10 years ago, the focus was always just about how you made the technology better. And there didn't really seem to be any downsides. The downsides were just that it didn't always work, or you wanted to do something and you couldn't quite get there yet. And then I would say about 10 years or so ago, we started to have concerns about data privacy, about bias in algorithms, more recently hallucinations and so on. I'm still very much focused on helping organizations get value and the best out of AI, but now the focus is very much on how do you do it with avoiding the risks and mitigating any potential downsides.
Perfect, thank you. Jacob?
I would say I bring two lenses to this conversation. One is the center of government policy, and the other one is the academic. So if we start with the first, at the Tony Blair Institute, our main role is to help political leaders drive change. And we believe right now that technology is the best lever to improve life and outcomes. And the reason for that is many other traditional drivers of growth are actually stagnant or even in retreat. Think, for example, about population growth. We see a stagnant population in many Western countries. Think about globalization, which is in reverse. So if you want to drive growth and improve social outcome, technological innovation is your best hope at the moment. And of course, we'll come to how responsibility is a key part of that. On the other hand, I'm also an academic researcher. I did my PhD at the Oxford Internet Institute focusing on AI governance specifically. My own research focused on how you evaluate and audit AI systems, for example, for transparency, fairness, safety. And this is not an easy task because on the one hand, you need to come up with completely new tools and methods for technology that is moving very fast, but you also need to operationalize very thick concept like fairness and transparency into technical requirements. So happy to talk both about the central government policy, but also that more academic aspects.
So I work for Wave. We are an AI company first. We're building AI software that will be deployed in the real world. So my perspective, I guess, is a slightly more practical one in that what does it take to actually get embodied AI systems into the real world, following kind of legal and regulatory frameworks that will make sure that the way in which we're building and developing these systems is done so responsibly. Obviously, my job role is public policy, so my bias is obviously towards thinking about the public policy and regulatory lens. But it also is a scale up, with investors behind us. It's also about ultimately what will return investment and get a commercially viable application of AI into the real world, delivering the promise and the benefits that we so widely talk about, but actually quite often it's really hard to see. So before this, I was in the civil service. We would talk a lot about the potential of these technologies. And one of the reasons why I made the pivot and shifted to Wave was it was a desire to actually start working on something and get it out into the real world. So I think from our perspective at Wave, we've got quite a lot of experience now facing into this intersection of policy around AI, automotive, robotics, and really seeing some of the tensions and the challenges that it's going to take to get these products to market.
So with that, we have a bit of an eye on who we have in front of us. Ray, I'd like to start with a question for you. I was sitting on the train this morning next to someone who was in construction, and we were talking about ChatGPT, and he's like, yeah, I know my guys use ChatGPT. I've used it twice. I'm not sure what to do. This is a massive multinational corporation, by the way. In your experience with all of the enterprise use of AI, what advice would you give a company wanting to use AI but nervous about getting it wrong?
Well, I guess I'm a little bit biased, having just written a book called Governing the Machine. The answer for me is governance. You need to have a robust governance process in an organization, which is going to identify everywhere that people are thinking about using AI. That might be AI that's developed within the company, or it may be third-party programs that are purchased in, because these days so many systems have AI in them, and you need to be aware of that. And then what you need to do is to risk assess any use of AI. If it's not particularly risky, absolutely fine, just get on with it. But if it's a higher risk usage, you want to do a much more detailed evaluation, understand those risks, and figure out what you're going to do to mitigate against them. And that requires collaboration across the whole of the enterprise. And I think that's really important. I've worked with a global bank not too long ago, and we spent the first 3 or 4 months just aligning across the different departments. So you've got the data and AI team, you've got legal, you've got risk and compliance, you've got HR, and a number of others, all the sort of tech infrastructure people. Everyone needs to be part of it. Security, cybersecurity, really important. But of course, if you're involving so many people, you also have to have clear accountabilities to understand who's doing what and how you kind of interact with each other. And then I think the final aspect is building the capabilities that you need to support that program. So that's going to be things like training, You're going to need some technical tools, you'll need documentation, you'll want some reporting and so on. So there's some process and skills that you'll need to support any kind of AI governance program that you have. And a practical tip, I think, on the training side that we used, at least at Accenture when I helped to design that program, was to put the AI governance training into the mandatory data privacy training. So everybody in the company gets data privacy training, GDPR and all that kind of thing. And if you can embed some of your AI training into that, it makes it a little less onerous and it becomes part of an existing curriculum rather than having to invent something new.
Interesting, thank you. So really making sure that everyone gets it from the ground up and yeah.
Absolutely, not just the technical people, but everybody needs to understand it. To your point about construction, these are probably all kinds of people in different jobs who might be using Copilot or ChatGPT or whatever it is. They need to just be aware of what it can do and most importantly what it can't do and where you need to be careful.
Interesting. We know that the UK government is already having a clear AI opportunities agenda, but where does responsible AI fit into that agenda? Are we taking that into account?
So it's a core part of that agenda. I think the first thing to say is that public attitudes really matter to any technology. We don't need to look far back into history. Let's take two more perhaps controversial examples. Think about vaccines. Even if you have a vaccine that is working, whether it's quickly rolled out and has effect also depends on people's attitude towards vaccination. Another example is nuclear power, where we can only ever make use of nuclear power if we also have robust safeguards around who can access it, how to prevent large-scale failure. I'm not saying that AI is analogous to either of those. I'm saying that the very idea that we need to think about responsibility when trying to get opportunities from a technology, that should be our starting point. Now, turning to the UK government's AI opportunities agenda specifically, we at the Tony Blair Institute have been very supportive of this from the start, and we think it's right to focus on the opportunities. However, in order to see rapid diffusion of AI, we will also need to ensure that the public has trust in these technologies and that the technology are worthy of the public trust. So it's both a matter of sound engineering and governance. This goes partly to the kind of aspect that Ray spoke about, but at the government perspective, that might have to do with mandatory testing and certification procedures. But it also has to do with how you communicate about these technologies. So, for example, even when Apple or tech companies are trying to sell a new product, they don't just focus on the technical specification and say, look how great they are on this benchmark. No, they communicate, how does this actually solve people's problem? Do you have music in your pocket and so on? So we need to get to a more human element of AI. But let me also give some data and real concrete, real-world examples. At the Tony Blair Institute, we recently conducted polling together with Ipsos on public attitude towards AI in the UK. And we surveyed over 3,700 individuals from diverse backgrounds. And a few numbers that stood out. One is that over 25% of UK adults actually use generative AI at least once a week. And that is quite a remarkable number for technology that's only 3 years old. Compare that to internet that took 20 years to roll out. At the same time, almost 50%, half of UK adults have never used generative AI. And this also shows a barrier that we shouldn't just expect the current rate of adoption to diffuse across society. But it was even more interesting when we dig deeper into the number and look at risk perceptions. So, for example, while the UK government stressed opportunities, there are actually more UK adults are more likely to view AI as a threat to the economy than as an opportunity. Maybe because of fear of job displacement, maybe because of discomfort. So we think that there is a big task here, both from an education and communication perspective, but also from an actual responsible AI governance perspective. And the key takeaway here is that we will only see success in terms of implementing the Opportunities Action Plan if we also do that responsibly and build public trust.
Yeah.
Interesting, thank you. So that's how, I suppose, in theory and the plans and how we're going to get this sorted. I'd be really curious to hear then from Daniel, like your feet on the ground right now. You're like involved in a company that is really building literally the future. So what does this regulatory landscape mean and look like for a company like Wave? Yeah, if you could also share just a bit more of your thoughts on how practically this lands with you.
Yeah,
because we're pragmatic, right? Remember, guys, this is not philosophy.
Yeah, and I think the perspective also speaks a little bit to Jacob's perspectives there on public trust. But before maybe I dig into the question, let me just give a bit more kind of context to kind of what Wave's building and where we've come from. Because Wave ultimately, is a scale-up. And actually our scale-up journey is very much founded in Cambridge, because Wave started in 2017 as a PhD from our CEO and co-founder, Alex Kendall. So he was studying computer vision at Cambridge, and he saw an opportunity to look at the self-driving problem through the lens of machine learning. So basically using data learned models to be able to train and understand how to interact with the world. And this actually is a huge paradigm shift from how traditionally we thought about self-driving, which is programmed, it's mapped. There are a lot of limitations to how scalable and economically viable these technologies would be. So flash forward from 2017, where Wave was operating out of a garage in Cambridge. We had a small Twizy kind of driving around the roads of Cambridge to 2025, where Wave is now a global company. We have a footprint across North America, Stuttgart, London, and Tokyo. So these where we have test fleets. So, large passenger vehicles that are out every day testing our AI software, learning about the world around it, and being able to use that intelligence to be able to drive safely and to generalize its understanding about that driving environment. So you've got a really scalable software that's able to basically be embodied on vehicles and drive that vehicle anywhere. And that's the thesis behind Wave. Now, obviously, in that context, we're talking about a highly regulated, safety critical landscape, so the automotive sector. And this very much is kind of the first use case for what Wave's building. So we talk about embodied AI that can be embodied on physical beings. It's a data learned approach that can adapt and respond to its environment. In the automotive industry, obviously, you have a well-established regime of regulation that ultimately dictates how you will certify and release systems, components, and vehicles into the market. So Wave's focus is very much on how we evolve that regulatory landscape that already exists, that already sets very clear guardrails around how you bring software systems in automotive to market in the context of an automated driving system. So all of that is set at the international level at the UN. And then when we think about how we bring that to public roads in particular jurisdictions, we also need a legal framework. So in the UK, for instance, there's been a lot of work on an AV Act. This is really a world-leading framework for grappling with that really thorny issue of liability. So when we think about AI in the real world, we also have to grapple some of these key questions about, well, who is responsible? And if you're in a vehicle that's ultimately being driven by an automated driving system, you as a human driver are no longer responsible. So from a legal perspective, what does that actually mean? From an insurance perspective, how do we set these frameworks in place? So the UK has actually moved quite far with this, and we now have a national framework for deployment in the UK. So these two pieces, the technical regulation at the international level and the national deployment frameworks, are really good examples of how you kind of provide that kind of certification layer around something as cutting edge as a foundation model in a vehicle. And that for Wave is absolutely crucial for how we will scale and bring our product to market. But it requires a lot of work. And the big challenge, and I think the kind of final point I'll make here is, it's all right having those individual pieces, but without harmonization, addressing some of the fragmentation that exists across different jurisdictions, whether that's at a local level or nationally, makes it really challenging to bring something like an automotive grade piece of automation software to market in a production vehicle, because no one builds a production vehicle just to be deployed in central London. OEMs, so car manufacturers, they're building these systems for production fleets. And so the harmonized framework to be able to deploy seamlessly across borders to the same high international standards is going to be absolutely crucial for how we will see something like an embodied AI in automotive come to market and actually be one of those really early use cases. And so that, I think, is also, from a public trust perspective, really key because, A, we've got a really good example of how, with the right guardrails and a very clear regulatory framework, we can bring these cutting-edge models to the real world. But also it's through applications like that that people will start to get more comfortable and understand actually how this technology can really transform and change the way we interact with our products that we're so used to every day. And I think that's also how public trust does longer-term pivot. And I don't worry too much today about public attitudes and perceptions based on surveys, because I think a lot of that will actually gradually shift when we give more evidence and more examples of how you do this safely in the real world.
Now you can get directly involved with the show. Leave us up to 60 seconds of audio by visiting cambridgetechpodcast.com on your computer or phone and click Call the Show from the menu. Send us your news items, events to promote, leave us feedback or suggest a guest.
It's so true. It's really hard to even know where to begin thinking about policy and regulation, specifically when you're far removed from it, let alone being asked your opinion. I see Jacob looking at me with full intent. I believe you. Would you like to react to what Daniel said?
Well, to start with, I agree with a lot of it, especially the need for international harmonized standards. At the Blair Institute, one of the things that we do, perhaps not everyone knows, in addition to being a UK-based think tank, we're also a non-profit political advisory around the world. We work with 45 governments, so from Africa, Middle East, Asia Pacific. And because we often work with also political leaders in developing or middle-income countries, we see that for a lot of these countries, harmonized standards, it's not just about safety, it's also about prosperity. They will not always be able to develop their own tech stack, but in order to diffuse technology, for whether that is from US or the US, there need to be shared evaluations. We need to be able to compare testing and certification that happen in different jurisdictions. That is very important, both from a safety and from a prosperity perspective. If I take this opportunity to also look a bit at AI regulation specifically in the UK, is that UK stands out a bit in terms of its approach, which has so far been a sector-specific approach, compared to, let's say, the European Union, which has introduced a more of a horizontal AI regulation. With time, it has shown that the UK approach is actually quite good and promising, because if you think about the different risks and ethical challenges that AI poses, let's say, for example, it can be related to bias or to safety or to transparency. They really cut to different kinds of regulatory logic. Some of that has to do with human rights and anti-discrimination law. Some of that has to do with national security law. Some of that has to do with more competition law, and this work CMA does. So therefore, we at the Tony Blair Institute believe that it's better to stick with the current sector-specific approach and strengthen the capability, resources, mandate of existing regulators. Of course, this might still need to be done a gap analysis and see, do we need new sector-specific regulators? But we think we should avoid introducing a new horizontal regulation. So I think one can be very much pro-good AI governance without wanting to, let's see, a new regulatory logic that can actually, in the worst of cases, even create confusion both for companies and scale-ups and for the regulators themselves.
So to summarize, are you suggesting more bespoke regulations, more vertical regulations?
Yeah, let's take a very concrete example. In healthcare, there are very clear requirements on medical devices, on their performance, on their consistency, on their robustness, on their failure tolerance. For example, if you're taking blood pressure or if you're doing anything else, that needs to be safe and it needs to work. Now, from a user perspective, you shouldn't care what is the underlying technology. Is this a machine learning system? Is this a logic-based system? Is this an optics system? We are saying that the same sector-specific standards should apply to AI as any other technology, so there should be no gaps or shortcuts. But that doesn't mean that just because it's AI in this medical device, that it needs to be governed by the same bill that, for example, governs, let's say, anti-discrimination in hiring algorithms, which is a completely different business. And by the way, those laws also differ, for example, between different countries and jurisdictions, whether you want to focus more on treating individuals equally, or if you want to, like in the US, have a certain demographic parity in your hiring. So that's why we believe that govern both medical devices and discrimination in hiring, but do that with the existing regulators. And there are a lot of good regulators in the UK, whether that is Ofcom for social media platform, CMA for example, anti-competition law, and I don't have the concrete number, but I think it's another 200 or so. Yeah.
Wow.
Can I jump in? Can I jump in as well? Because I mean, my perspective is another vertical, right? So, I mean, the automotive is the other example of this. What exactly is AI regulation going to be doing in the context of automotive? So, in Europe, in the UK, we have type approval. Type approval is a conformity testing process. So, you have to work with a regulator, so a third-party independent regulator like the VCA in the UK, so the Vehicle Certification Agency. You develop a safety case, you present all your evidence, you do all your testing, everything that you would expect and you see in kind of best practice around maybe guidance for general AI models. we already have in type approval. And actually type approval goes much further than quite a lot of the guidance that we're seeing even at the EU level. The challenge back is, I understand that there's maybe questions and there's applications and uses of AI that we don't yet fully understand. But to Jacob's point, certainly in very established industries where we have regulatory frameworks in place, a lot of the answers are already there. What actually maybe matters is how well equipped those regulators are to really understand the risk of those systems, which is why it's also on industry to work with their peer regulators to build that capacity and understanding. I think that's a challenge, and that's something that the UK government recognises. But in terms of reinventing the wheel, I think actually we risk putting too many blockers up to bringing forward new AI technologies into sectors that are really ripe for their transformation and also already have the answer to how we actually think about it.
How would you tackle this as a problem? What would be a suggestion that you would have for regulators to be able to tackle AI in the regulations that they would have otherwise never really considered? Like, how do they?
I think a common theme here was maybe actually downplay AI and focus on the actual use cases and risk evaluation. There will be cases in which you need to test the foundation models and see what are the limitations of these. And that is what the AI Security Institute, ACE, is doing quite successfully, because some of these properties of the models impact downstream applications. But that is more of a knowledge gathering exercise. When it comes to the actual regulation, we can focus less on that and focus more about the safety of the embodied AI vehicle or the medical device. But I'm sure this goes into also what Ray is going to talk about around in practice.
So underplay the whole AI thing and just really focus on how it's actually affecting the industry and make sure that is incorporated in the regulations that are already standing. Ray, how would that translate to enterprise? Do you notice something similar in that sense?
I do, very much so, because I think one of the things I said earlier was the importance of risk assessment or risk triaging, right? So looking at every use of AI and figuring out, is this high risk or is this low risk? And the most important way you do that is to think about, how is this AI going to be used? So if it's going to be used in a medical evaluation or in a credit lending or in a benefits assessment or something, it's clearly high impact on people and high risk. So exactly to the point, those are the applications, whether it's AI or it's something else that's driving those are the ones you want to really look at very carefully. If it's being used in something that's relatively trivial, recommending another product or something like this that can't really harm anyone, well, then you don't need to apply such stringent controls. And even the EU AI Act says, look at the use cases to determine is something high risk or not high risk, and then you apply the regulations according to that. I think the challenge for organizations is actually, in most cases, identifying where AI is going to be used. And my practical tip there would be to look for what I call checkpoints. AI is being introduced all over the place in organizations now, and often a good way to do it is to go to where the budget sits. So typically, if you're going to develop a new program internally or you're going to buy software in or whatever, somebody's going to have to spend some money. Spending money typically requires approval. So at that point in the process, ask a question, is the thing that you're wishing to spend the money on, does it have AI in it? And then if the answer is yes, then you say, okay, well, let's understand what that AI does. Is it higher risk or low risk? And then from there, you can flow on to thinking about the right level of assessment. And the other thing that I would say as a sort of practical tip is find someone to lead the AI governance within the organization who really wants to do it and who has enough budget and clout in the organization to actually make it happen. I'm very often asked, should it be the general counsel? Should it be the chief data officer? Should it be the chief security officer? Who should own it? And my answer is, it doesn't matter who owns it, because everybody has to be involved. But the person who owns it has to be passionate about it, have some money, and really want to actually be able to get stuff done in the organization. And that's the key criteria for me in success.
That's fascinating. I feel like we all trip over ourselves when we hear the word AI because we feel like, oh, it's new, I don't understand it, I need to be a tech expert, this thing, it's alien, whatever. But what I'm hearing here is actually, guys, just focus on the risk. Forget about AI for a second because it's going to be omnipresent. And this will lead us into our next question that I'd like to ask Daniel. So you work on embodied AI. Earlier today, we heard about humanoid robots. We're hearing about how AI is breaking the physical realm, as if we weren't already overwhelmed with it not being in the physical realm. It's going to start being omnipresent. And in a previous conversation, I believe we had as a panel as well, you mentioned that currently everyone's tripping over themselves for this weird abstract AI thing. It's very theoretical, it's very technical. But the moment that it's going to start becoming further and further into our lives, like ChatGPT is making its way into our lives, but it's still an app. It's not very tangible. The moment you've got a humanoid at your door, probably you're going to start thinking about things differently. The moment you have a delivery thing that is a drone that is hanging over your front door, that's also maybe a bit more confronting. So Daniel, you're working like very exciting field at the complete tip of embodied AI. This is like the cliche question, guys, forgive me, but what is your vision of embodied AI 10 years from now? I want to ask 5 years, but I feel like that may be underwhelming. What do you prefer, 5 or 10 years from now?
I'm slightly concerned that you're going to find my answer for 5 or 10 years not as exciting as you hope. I mean, I think a lot of what, from our perspective, what we're building, these are actually software models that are very kind of ripe and ready for deployment. But also one of the other challenges we always face as a scale-up or kind of any kind of startup is thinking about what's your route to market and what's the commercially viable way in which you're going to start actually bringing forward revenue. So actually Wave's AI models that are being built to kind of power fully self-driving vehicles, they also have a very clear role in driving assistance. And so a lot of the market today in the consumer vehicle market is about advanced assistance features where there is increasing cooperation between the driver and the system. And actually, so the early use cases and products that we will be shipping and are focused on over the next 5 years in moving that paradigm from quite traditional advanced assistance systems to something that is a lot more cooperative. It's an AI foundation model that's ultimately there powering the vehicle. And that is our gateway and step towards building towards higher levels of automation over the next kind of 10 years out. So in the automotive industry, I think actually it's going to be a gradual shift. But I think that's also quite reassuring because that's also how you scale responsibly in some respects, right? You need to start bringing your customers with you. And I think what's really key about that is what we're going to see in the next kind of 5 years is the first examples of embodied AI in vehicles actually going through an approval and certification process. So we're going to be able to demonstrate and prove that you can take an end-to-end AI model, embody it on a vehicle and safely deploy it in the real world. And that'll be through some form of advanced assistance system. And that is just the stepping stone then to wider adoption. And then in the future, who knows, right? But we're talking about behavior change at the highest level when we start thinking about automation in vehicles and embodied AI. And automotive is just the first use case. So you can imagine how data learned systems combined with robotics can apply across a whole range of areas of the economy. So automotive is just the starting point.
Interesting. Are there any questions from the floor? Let's get the mic runners up.
Yeah, hi, Graham Hine. A question for Daniel. When cars are fully automated, then people won't need to own cars because it'll be possible just to have a car call when you need to use it. At the moment, 95% of time, cars are just in people's drives, sitting, doing nothing. So will that then decimate the automotive industry?
I did say behavior change is one of the impacts of this. I don't think it decimates. I think it just changes the business model and it changes the way in which these vehicles come to market. The fleets that OEMs are building today, they service a consumer market that is based on private ownership. I guess a future model is more fleets are being built for fleet operators to deploy as part of automated services. I think there's also the benefit with scalable and more kind of cost-effective automation. You can start having services and fleets that are able to reach areas that once over weren't reachable by a commercially viable kind of fleet operator. So there's also the potential for these fleets to be going everywhere and anywhere. So I think it's just about kind of rethinking the business models. But we also always hear from our customers. And at the end of the day, it's ultimately car manufacturers and fleet operators who are our customers that we talk to. We always hear from them and there'll always be a role and there'll always be somebody who wants to drive their vehicle. So certainly in the near to medium future, we're still going to be talking about choice. Not everyone is going to be opting for automation. People are still going to want to maybe drive their vehicles. This is going to be a gradual shift, but I agree. Like, I think the long-term vision and future really does completely rethink about what mobility looks like, and whether the automotive industry looks like what it does today, probably not. But also, we're already seeing competition-wise, there's a lot of change that automakers are having to make from that traditional model to ones where they're responding to disruptors in China, to some of the US players. So automation, software-based vehicles definitely is the way forwards. And I think that's the only way we're going to be able to remain competitive in Europe if we want to see an automotive industry in the next 10, 20 years' time.
Thank you. Fantastic. I think we have time for one last question.
You were talking about scale up. How do we avoid the phenomenon that we saw in the dot-com boom, where all of a sudden there's a panic-stricken dash to get into the market? And this leads to rapid growth without screening of personnel and training of personnel, and poaching, where advertisements appear that they're seeking to hire a team leader with an enormous bonus if he brings his existing team with him.
Right, do you wanna go?
I guess one of the questions is that a policy question or is it a corporate question?
Make your pick.
So we can maybe both answer on that one. I think it's very hard from an enterprise perspective. You can only hope that actually organizations focus on tangible value and applications of the technology. I think we're seeing a bit of a cooling in the marketplace for the tech talent not within the frontier companies that are trying to develop the models, but actually there's very few of those. But within the broader application arena, I think there's a little bit of a calming, which is probably a good thing.
Great. Jacob, do you want to fire answer?
And quickly from a sort of policy perspective, I think this is why it's so important to have a more long-term perspective. So right now, there's a big push to deploy exactly the models that happen to exist today. But we have to realize that this is a very young technology, and we believe that rather than rushing into that, the more important thing is how do we have structured pathway to bring new models and technologies to market, and this will be a continuous process. So the AI models that we'll have in 3 years' time will be more powerful than the ones we today, and so on. So not put all eggs in one basket, but to pave up both the deployment pathway and the regulatory pathways to make that as a more gradual improvement. That I think is the way forward.
Great, thank you very much. So to wrap up, don't put tech in a corner, involve every person, everyone, and stop thinking about tech as tech. Tech is supporting the human. Think about the human risks and continue the regulations as they have always been set up, and include tech vertically in the regulations instead of horizontally are my main takeaways.
Today's show was produced by Joe Donaghy of Cambridge TV and supported by our media partner Business Weekly. The Cambridge Tech Podcast is available on all major podcast platforms and on cambridgetechpodcast.com. If you've enjoyed this podcast, please give it a 5-star review. It'll really help others discover the show.